government cannot save you from extraterrestrials. They can't protect you from extraterrestrial invaders. There's nothing that any government here on this planet could do to protect you from extraterrestrials. And actually, it's basically been proven over the decades. I mean, there's people that get abducted on a regular basis. The government does nothing to help. That's because they can't. There's nothing they can do, and they know it. I'm just going to point some things out here, and then we'll talk about this. But okay, we've been told over the decades now, and we talk about this a lot. The government, when it comes to UFOs, they say they're either saying, "Oh, there's nothing to it; it's all imagination; it's all nonsense; it's all things that could be easily verified if we had more information," and on and on and on. And depending on what decade you're in and what part of the decade you're in, the story is a little bit different. Right now, we're at a point where there's unknown objects buzzing our Navy ships and our jet fighters on a regular basis, and the government has no answer as to the origin of these craft, and they're trying to make a determination right now as to whether these things are a threat to national security or not. That's where we're at right now. That could change at some point here. Who knows? 2 years from now, they could say, it's been determined that these things are all explained and there's no threat to national security. And then things go on again like they have in the past for like 5 or 10 or 20 years, and then they'll start the process over again. But regardless, the point of this is that over time, the government has basically, there's nothing they can do, and they have proven this over and over again. I want to point something out. There was a guy, he's passed on in recent years. His name was Ted Phillips. He was from the Midwest of the United States, and he was a person who his whole focus was on physical trace evidence of when flying saucers, any kind of weird craft landed, and there was at least one or more witnesses to the event. And he had investigated over 4,000 cases in 70 countries, most of them in the United States. And he made a lot, like he would go to, if a flying saucer or something would land on the ground, he would go check it out. A lot of times some of the things he would find would be, there'd be broken tree branches, that some trees would be damaged in the area or burned slightly on some parts of them. The ground would have the vegetation on the ground would be burned. The soil would be devoid of any life whatsoever. You wouldn't be able to grow anything on it anymore. There was a lot of different things he would find. He would find the landing pads. Like usually it would either be three landing pads in a triangular formation, or 4 landing pads in a rectangular formation. These are the kind of things that he would look into. And he did this over the course from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Over 4,000 cases he looked into. And again, most of them were in the United States. So it was something that he was interested in, and he collected all this data on it. He had a book that, he wrote a book about it. There was just a lot of information. He was actually working for the Center. A lot of the information he gathered, it was, he would provide it to the Center for UFO Studies that was established by J. Allen Hynek in the early 70s. So he was working with Hynek on this, and so that was basically what his whole thing was. It was just investigating these landings of these craft. And what an interesting job that would have been. But there's pictures, he has tons of evidence that he gathered over the years. But what's interesting about this is that this guy is out here on his own, basically doing this research, trying to gather data on all these landings. Okay, and we'll stick with the physical trace cases that he investigated in the United States. Okay, he's going to all these places where things actually landed, where there was actually evidence of these things landing. And you had a lot of times there would be multiple witnesses. Not only were there landing pads a lot of times, but sometimes they would actually find little footprints. Okay, so there were actual things landing. There was evidence that they landed. There were strange things that would happen to the vegetation. There'd be footprints, landing pad marks, all kinds of evidence, and he would gather this, right? So he's out there doing this, and guess where? Is there any group in the government out there doing this? How come he's the one, some guy all by himself out there gathering evidence, and yet nobody in the government's interested in this? Because I want you to think about this. Isn't that strange? I mean, if there are things landing in our country, right, that cannot be accounted for, you would think that would be of great military interest. You would really, really think that, the military would be very interested in this. Looks like somebody's invading our country. What if it's Russia? What if it's China? Right? Even though it's not, but just for the sake of argument, you would think that they would be investigating this for those kind of reasons, but they didn't. They didn't. In fact, early on in the 60s, when Phillips first started doing this, like he was at places like Socorro, New Mexico, where Lonnie Zamora had, there was the famous landing case involving a police officer named Lonnie Zamora, right outside Socorro, New Mexico. He was chasing a guy who was speeding, and then he noticed that something was going on in the desert there, and he investigated, and there was a craft sitting there, an egg-shaped craft with a weird emblem on it, and there was two little humanoids walking around, and then the humanoids got in the craft, and it took off, and it left evidence on the ground. Now, at the time, Project Blue Book, of course, as we know now, was just something to appease the public. It really wasn't a serious investigation. It was just something out there. Project Blue Book, which ended in 1969, they investigated it. Alan Hynek investigated it, and Ted Phillips looked into it too. But you would think that the military would be interested in all of these landing cases, but they're not. They're not. They have not been. In fact, Blue Book closed in 1969. They were done with it. They didn't investigate all the landing cases, by the way, either. Not even Blue Book did that. But Ted Phillips was investigating as much as he possibly could over those decades, from the 60s into the 80s. So you have this one guy out there running around, checking out from reports made by multiple witnesses of objects landing and leaving evidence that something was there, and he's investigating this, and yet the military is not interested in it. Why would that be? I'll tell you why that would be. Is because the military already knows what's going on. They already know there's nothing they could do about it. They know that there's beings from other planets coming here. And so what's the point in investigating collecting physical trace evidence to them? They already had evidence. They had evidence since 1947. Of course, the secret group did, Majestic 12. They're the ones who had the evidence since 1947. So that's why, over all this time, the government's not interested in things that happen in civilian areas. Now, if you were to call up the Air Force or any other federal government group about something strange landing in your backyard, they would tell you to call a local cops. That's because the people in the government, they can't do anything about it. And you would think they would be interested in it, but because especially something's landing, something's flying and landing in someone's backyard and then taking off, you think they would be interested in it, right? I mean, you would think that could be maybe some invader or somebody, but no. They know it's not China. They know it's not Russia. They know it's not from North Korea. They know it's not from any of those places. They know it's from beings that they have no control over. And that's because they're way more advanced than anything we have here, so there's no point in going chasing after or doing any sort of investigation because they already know what it is. I mean, it could be some new race that's showing up, and it doesn't matter. What does it matter? They can't do anything about it anyway. And that gets back to my point. My point is they can't do anything to help you either. Like people that get abducted by aliens over the decades for, the thousands, million people. Who knows how many people have been abducted over the years? There's nothing anybody could do for you. The police can't do anything about it. What are they going to do? And what's the military going to do? What's our own military going to do to stop invasions, people getting, people being forced to, getting forcibly removed from their environment and laid on an operating table and having things done to them as part of some apparent hybridization program? What's our government going to do to stop it? They can't. We don't have the technology to stop it. So instead, what's going on is they keep it a secret, and they study this thing secretly for the last 75 years now. And meanwhile, there's nothing they can do to help anybody if something with regard to these visitors, to regard to these invaders or whatever you want to call them, or maybe new tenants. Or are they tenants? I mean, maybe they're permanent tenants now because, I mean, why are they still here? I mean, if they were visiting, okay, they showed, like, there was a lot of UFOs that showed up in 1947, for instance, right? If they were visiting, okay, you'd think they'd be gone already. You'd think they'd have all they need. But they're not. They're still around. They're still doing stuff. They're still flying circles around our most advanced jet fighters over the ocean. They're flying in and out of the ocean. There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing our military can do about it. And there's nothing anybody can do to help the common person out there who has to deal with these things. Or hasn't dealt with them yet, or, you know, right now you could be someone who's being targeted for an abduction by an alien, or maybe you've been getting abducted for your whole life. You don't even know it. Maybe some people out there might know it and they might suspect it. Maybe some of you out there actually have been getting abducted and you do know it, and you've been seeing a psychiatrist about it. And you realize, what's anybody going to do? You know, what could anybody do? They can't do anything. And that's the point. The point is, that's why, you know, when it comes to things like investigating physical trace evidence, you know, that's found by you know, regular Joes out there, right, that reported, the Air Force, or anybody in the Pentagon for that matter, they don't want anything to do with these kind of cases anymore, because they got their own problems just dealing with the stuff that they're seeing with people. Uniformed people are dealing with on a regular basis. They're trying to worry about that. They can't help us because there's nothing they can do. What are they going to do? So we're on our own. We're on our own when it comes to extraterrestrials. You know, forcibly involving themselves in our environment, ripping people away from their own environment and doing things to them. You know, there's absolutely nothing no other human organization in the world can possibly do. And obviously the point of mentioning those physical trace cases is to show you that what's the point in even looking at it? We can't do anything. What are you going to do? We can't stop it. We can't fall. We can't. There's nothing we can do about it. There's things landing here. That's it. We don't have the technology to figure out where they're coming from, or where they're going, or where they're hiding. We just don't know. So that's where we are. So that's and actually, this is actually, you know, I recently talked about you know, different top reasons why, you know, the government doesn't you know, what I recently talked about the 5 top reasons for the cover up, and you know, I left the top reason as because of the panic it would cause. Well, as part of that, yeah, it could cause some panic, and part of that panic and I would tie this, what I'm talking about here, into that number 1 reason, because of the panic it would cause. Because there would be panic, because when the question is asked, is there anything you could do to prevent alien abductions, or like if they were to come out and just tell the whole truth, you know, full disclosure, what are they going to say? They're going to tell you there's nothing we could do. Yeah, they're abducting people. Yeah, what do you want us to do? We can't do anything about it. We don't have the technology. So that's why. That's another reason why number 1 in my book is now the panic, you know, and that full disclosure would cause, and that's why they're still keeping it secret. Like all this stuff that's going on now, I believe is a dog and pony show. The stuff that's going on with Congress and everything like that. I think it could be just a dog and pony show, just to appease the public, assuage the concerns of people in the military to have to see these things all the time, and you know, for the most part, are told not to talk about it. You know, they have to do something. You know, they have to at least acknowledge it, right? And besides that, like I also talk about, it's also a way to cover their butts. Like at some point in the future, when it becomes undeniable, when we, as you know, when the technology is so good that, you know, you'll be able to get your own proof on your own, right? People will be able to say, hey, yeah, there is something going on. A lot of people are just going to start realizing as time goes on, yeah, there is something going on. People right now who do not know this, right, they're going to start realizing. So they need the Air Force and everyone in the Pentagon, you know, they need to cover their butts now. So that's why you're having this semi disclosure with they're admitting that there's something out there that they can't explain, but they're not saying extraterrestrial. But at least now, at some point when everyone realizes in the future, they're going to say, well, yeah, we told you there's things out there. We don't know what we don't know. We still don't know what they are. So that's what's going on. But guess what? They can't protect you, and that's one of the main reasons why this thing is being covered up.